Hey, everybody. Welcome to a special Friday night pop-up Cup of Ray After Dark from down here at the world-famous Ferg Sports Bar and Grill on Central Avenue, just below 16th Street in the Edge District of St. Petersburg. We are just under a week away from the next Thursday night's NFL Draft. And, thinking about the draft is so many years in Buccaneers history. Teams picking in the top 5, picking in the top 10, picking, we have, going back, we always had a big pick and a lot of misses, right? A lot of hits. Seemed like a lot of the hits came later in the first round. And I would pose that in 1995, not only did the Buccaneers draft Warren Sapp out of Miami at number 12, but they actually draft Derek Brooks at number 28 out of Florida State University. And Bucs draft 27 next week in Thursday night's NFL draft, which you'll see next Thursday night live from Las Vegas. So I pose to you tonight, do the Buccaneers trade back? Who do they pick? Who are they going to put in that slot? What's the position of need for your Tampa Bay Buccaneers? It's a Cup of Ray front of Friday night pop-up from down here at the world-famous Ferg Sports Bar. Boy, I screwed that one up. Let's have a good time tonight. Got a drinking game for you. It's a Cup of Ray After Dark. Hey, everybody, welcome back to a Cup of Ray After Dark from down here at the world-famous Ferg Sports Bar and Grill. Couple of ground rules, couple of rules for tonight. Going to get them right out of the way at the top of the show. 1, don't pick up the phone because you know he's only calling because he's drunk and alone. 2, don't let him in because you'll have to kick him out again. And 3, don't be his friend because you're going to wake up in the bed with him. I screwed that one up too. Hey, everybody, so what are your thoughts on the draft? Got a couple of things I want to talk about tonight. One of the big things I wanted to talk about, and I had to go back and reread it. One of my favorite writers of all time, locked it down, covering the Bucs here in Tampa Bay, was a homegrown kid, graduate of the University of South Florida, graduate with honors in mass communications, started out as a sports clerk for the St. Petersburg Times back in the day. And, of course, I'm talking about Don Banks. And Don Banks would leave the Times, which back then was still the St. Petersburg Times, and go up to Minnesota and actually become the beat writer for the Minnesota Vikings after he covered the Bucs so greatly, covered the Bucs so good down here for the St. Petersburg Times. Paper that I grew up, my first love. Hubert Mizell, St. Pete Times. We had Tom McEwen. We had the Tampa Trib. A couple of great papers. One of the great hidden mystery. People would come here on vacation. We were a tourist destination town here. But we had some of the best newspapers. Of course, Pulitzer Prize winning Mr. Pointer, who ran the St. Petersburg Times. Now there's the Pointer Institute for Media Studies, still teaching people, great reporters of tomorrow, how to lock it down and how to cover the news. But Don Banks would go on, and of course, you guys know him. If you don't know him, some of you older cats, longer in the tooth, know him. He went on to work for Sports Illustrated, and Snap Judgment was the piece he ran. And the fantastic story about that is he used to have to finish that piece every Sunday by 7 p.m. after all the games would play on Sunday, because of course it would run and for Sports Illustrated. And here's the best part about it is if you like Monday Morning Quarterback, of course that's with Peter King. If you like Good Morning, it's Good Football Morning in America, or if you like Monday Morning Quarterback, you like stuff like that breaks down all the things that happen in a football game on a Sunday. Breaking and analyzing everything down. You can thank Don Banks for that. At least one of the forefront doing that, covering that and locking it down with all the events of the day, getting it written, had to submit it by 7 p.m. And of course it would run the next day. But he ran a piece. If you haven't read it, I put it on my Facebook page on the Booker Reese draft, the Buccaneers and Booker Reese, of course, in 1983 or 82. I'm sorry. I'm going to get into that here. I want to cover that, but I'm going to get a couple of your comments. I have a couple of comments already in here on a Friday night. Let me start it off with Johnny Dean says, good USFL game on right now. Actually, Johnny, I got to crump you there. There's a better Rays Red Sox game, and it's happening just across the street from me there at Tropicana Field. I think the Rays are putting guys on base now in the bottom of the eighth. They were down 4-3. People are kind of sitting on their hands. What's going to happen in the next few minutes, guys and girls, is there's going to be a plethora of people, Leo word, plethora of people that are going to come rocking it down here right from the, thousands of people that are Tropicana Field are going to come across the street here to Ferg's. Probably catch the end of that USFL game that Johnny Dean's talking about. Going to be down here tomorrow for the Tyson, what's the fight, guys and girls? Tyson Fury fight from Wembley Stadium. Big fight going on. Of course, I'm going to be down here tomorrow on the Tampa St. Pete Sports Connection, covering in for Mike Rickard. He gave me the keys to the car. I'm going to be driving that bad boy. I'm going to be appearing on radio. I'm going to be on radio stations all over Tampa Bay. Going to have the Eckerd Tritons basketball coach, men's basketball coach, and a player on with me tomorrow. I'm going to have Ben Botham. Of course, you guys know Ben's covering, talking with baseball with me. Ben, just the relief pitcher. Always like having talking to Ben. But yeah, tomorrow's my first time actually running a radio station. I'm going to be on several radio stations, but taking it live across the entire Tampa Bay area. So I'm looking forward to that. I've been practicing. We put game, I got to at least look at my script, and I do have a script. James Canada, what's up, Ray? James, thanks for coming in on a Friday night, man. I missed you last Friday night, and that was all me, and I apologize for that, my friend. Yaj in here, great job, Ray. Yaj, I appreciate you, and I really do. And Christopher Cole, hey buddy, hey Christopher, good to see you. And here's my boy Gary Seast Ghostwolf. I love you, Gary. I really appreciate the support you give me. I love the feedback. I love communicating with you. Good read with Don Bank. I'm glad you got a chance to look at that. Let's talk about that right now. Let me jump into it. Couple of questions we're going to ask tonight. First of all, I want to tell you guys, not knowing if they're going to be Boston fans or Tampa Bay fans, but anytime you see someone in back of me coming in, I'm going to play a little drinking game. I'm going to make up an excuse as to who I am or what I'm doing here. I'm going to whatever. I may be an ex-basketball player. I may be a city councilman here in the city of St. Petersburg. I'm going to do a little game. If they get close enough, they're wondering what I'm doing. And inevitably it happens when I'm down here on the streets in St. Petersburg, the Berg. Every time I come up with I want to say hypothesis, every time I come up with what I'm doing down here, what is this? Of course, they'll see the BR. If they know Bucs Report, they know the Bucs. They've seen us. They know me, hopefully. I'm starting to get a little bit of a reputation down here. Not good. I'll make something up. Every time that happens, if you are drinking tonight, grab your libation, do a shot, big gulp of your beer. If you're smoking because you have that medically legal card or you're in one of the states that it's recreational to have that kind of stuff these days, which obviously down here on the streets of St. Petersburg it is. Having played in hey, I don't know, fine, you're fine. It's obviously legal down here, at least in some way, shape, or form, because if you're out here, you'd smell it. That's my game for tonight. So bear with me. Get the comments in here. I want to again know, what do you guys think for the Buccaneers at number 27 next Thursday night? Do they trade back? Do they keep the pick? Obviously, you're looking at the needs. So you're looking at what the Bucs might want to bring in the draft. But I want to work it back to Gary. I'm glad you said that. Thank you. That Don Banks read. And basically, it was the. I'm gonna take a lot of liberty here if you guys don't mind. I'm gonna go ahead and just talk about the story because really it works back to that draft, and that was basically because we always talk about when Hugh Culverhouse doesn't give Doug Williams that contract in 1983 or 84. I'm sorry, and he makes it away. And how that was a downfall. 15 years it is. 15 years where the Buccaneers didn't make the playoff. And now, mind you, 1979 and 1982, 2 times in 3 years, the Bucs win the NFC Central. So Tampa Bay fans, we're here. We're like going, not only is it 0-26, but then worst to first in 79. But now we win the NFC Central, again, with the Packers, the Vikings, the Lions, the Bears, oh my. We win that NFC Central twice in 3 years. So our trajectory is like this, right? 1982, the Bucs go into the draft. Now, guys and girls, remember back when the NFL draft consisted of telephones that were on all the tables with the helmet, the big team helmet, and those generic helmets. But you had a telephone, and they were all congregating in New York. And the team went, and there was no internet. This was way before the internet. Well, at least 13 years before Windows 95 or AOL dial-up in the mid 90s, which I'm sad to say I remember that, and a lot of y'all out there do too. Bucs send one of the Bucs actually send. I got his name right here. I want to go ahead and give a little bit of shout out to the guy, Pat Merculo, who was actually the head trainer for the Buccaneers. He gets the plush job of going to New York, and he's going to answer that phone when the team decides basically who's on the clock or who they're looking for, who they finally know they're fighting up to. Now, it came down to a guard from Penn State and Sean Farrell, and they were looking at Abe Gibran, a defensive line coach, and Wayne Fonts, a defensive coordinator for the Buccaneers, really liked a player out of Bethune-Cookman, a real raw player, but a freakishly talented guy in Booker Reese. At the time, the Bucs had Leroy Selman locking it down on the right side, right? Leroy Hall of Fame Selman. But they were looking, as the teams do, again, winning the NFC Central twice in 3 years, they're looking to bring in someone to bookend on Leroy's side, and eventually he's going to end up taking over for Leroy. So you keep, you want to bring it in, like we see with the Buccaneers, your Buccaneers in 2020, 2022, 2021, looking to bring in a Joe Tryon-Shoyinka so he can learn behind the guys, looking to bring young people in so they can continue to learn from some of these cagey veterans that have not only now won a championship, but have played in the league and played fantastically. What do the Buccaneers do at the inside tackle position? Because, wouldn't it be a luxury to have an Ndamukong Suh back for another year alongside of Vita Vea as the Bucs maybe bring in a youngster at interior defensive line or nose tackle, I should say, or defensive guard. Sorry. So let's go back to 1982. They send Pat to New York and they tell him, look, they call him a couple of minutes before they're on the clock and they call him and they say, look, put two names down. You write down Sean Farrell, again, the guard from Penn State, who the Bucs did end up. So, and you write down Booker Reese, and we'll let you know when it's time who we're going to take, because they were literally fighting to the last second. Gets to within 1 minute. The Buccaneers are on the clock. They get to within 1 minute. They don't want to lose it, like a Dante Culpepper and the Vikings. And what year was that, where the Vikings actually passed up, or the team that lost a chance to draft? Because remember, if you're in the NFL draft, if you don't make that draft in your allotted time, you just lose a draft pick. Another team jumps in front of you and you go behind that team. So you're basically just and it behooves you because you're not getting anything to trade down. You're just literally trading out of your spot one back, and everyone keeps leapfrogging you until it's time. So since I have 1 minute, they call him, and there's a ruckus there in New York. The phone is it's the old rotary. For those of you who don't know what this is, a rotary dial-up, you actually had to dial the phone. The technology sucked. There was no cordless telephones, not yet anyway, in 1982. And they call him with a minute left, and they said, look, it's not Sean Farrell, but it's Booker Reese. Write it on a card and take it up to hand it to Pete Rozelle. Because of some noise, I think the Rays just tied it. I'll have to check it for you guys. Hold on. No, but they have runners on first and third, one out in the bottom of the ninth, and they're pulling the pitcher. So Rays have runners at the corners, first and third, one out, bottom of the ninth. Rays just keep on doing stuff like this, keep on having games like this. So, they didn't get the double play is what happened. That's why there was a couple of Red Sox fans over here. So the ruckus there in New York, the connection's really bad. Pat Mercurio up there doesn't hear them say it's not Sean Farrell, it's Booker Reese. What he thinks he hears is the pick is Sean Farrell. Do it. Put the card in. He writes down Sean Farrell, walks it up to the lectern, hands it to Pete Rozelle. And imagine the surprise in the Buccaneers war room. Again, they're not on the phone live with him. There's no wireless connection. There's no live inside look at the war room back then as far as going back upstream. The Buccaneers are inside the war room, and all of a sudden the draft pick comes over to the television. The Buccaneers, with the selection in the first round, select Sean Farrell, guard out of Penn State. That was not the pick. They had decided they were going to go to Booker Reese. Now, here's the thing. Even if they pass on Booker Reese at that point, they get Sean Farrell. Ends up being a lockdown 9-year veteran in the league, played for 4 NFL teams, played for the Bucs for 4 years. Pretty solid interior guard on the offensive line, made 1 Pro Bowl. So right there, that mistake alone would have just been fine, right? But here's what happened. All of a sudden, the Buccaneers, they're getting near the second round, and the Bucs didn't have a second-round pick in 1982, and Booker Reese is still on the board. So imagine a Phil Kruger, Phil Kruger wasn't with the Bucs team, but imagine you got Wayne Fonts, you got Abe Gibran and John McKay, who basically allowed them. It was actually Hernan was the director of player personnel, the guy who they wanted in the first part of the first round is still on the board in that second round coming around. So now the Buccaneers are thinking, wow, wouldn't this be just a cat's meow if we can trade up and get Booker Reese, who falls to the second round? Now, what they didn't do is they didn't put logic into their head and think, why is this guy falling to the second round? What are the other 27 NFL teams seeing that we're not seeing? Why is Booker Reese going to still be on that board? And I'm going to continue to I want to make sure no one's commenting on this story or talking about it. So, Christopher, give me a chance to see the game. So the Red Sox still have runs into corners. Bucs Skull Gang in the house says, what thought restructure Tom Brady contract? $9 million. No extra year. Did they offer him some ownership? A la Miami Dolphins? I'm kidding. I just always try to put a little fuel on that fire. Obviously, it opens up money. It kicks that can a little further down the street, but there's not a whole lot of the Bucs don't have a lot of wiggle room like they had last season as they got the whole gang back together, and they're not going to have the whole gang back in 2022 together. But it does open up $9 million because the Bucs are going to have what they got six picks next week in the 7 rounds of the National Football League draft. It's going to have to sign those draft picks and possibly also still look to restructure another contract or two, maybe a Cam Brate, what have you. And so they can continue to make a little money to maybe bring in a free agent or to continue to address a team need. A little bit of activity in the background there. Alex Schaumburger, hey, what's up, Ray? Alec, good to see you on a Friday night. Bucs Skull Gang in the house says Bucs just someone today. Just signed. I think you were saying Bucs just signed someone today again at defensive tackle. Here's the thing, guys. I don't know about the Tom Brady thing. I just basically pull up the Bucs Report article and try to get myself filled in because the funny thing happens from Monday through Friday. I step in from my day job straight to my night job, and at UPS especially, but even my day job, I don't have my cell phone. All I have my cell phone at night, I'm listening to historical podcasts. I'm listening to From the Vault, the NFL, Andrea Kramer doing a fantastic job, From the Vault podcast. If you're not checking that out, interviews with Bill Parcells, interview with Tom Brady, second year in the league back in 2001, interviews with some people, and of course, Steve Sable himself's no longer with us. But love that. So I'm looking back at the history so I can try to formulate or try to tell a story like the 1982 draft where the Buccaneers make the biggest fumble in the history of the National Football League draft. Rays just scored they load the bases. So it's still 4-3. Rays are down 1. If you're looking for a little account here, bottom of the ninth, bases loaded, still with only 1 out. And the Red Sox, they didn't pull the pitcher, but the Red Sox manager looks like he's about to. Anyhow. So I don't follow news at all at night. I depend on you guys to tell me, guys and girls, and I get in here. So everything I'm reading here, right? Defensive tackle. If you know the name, I'd appreciate it if you can share that here. We could talk about it a little bit. Also, Bucs Skull Gang the house is great win last night for the Bolts. Oh man! Not only that, brother or sister. Not only that, but what a great thing. Steven Stamkos, of course, becomes the leading scorer in the history of the Lightning. It tied Marty St. Louis in a previous game, but passes Marty St. Louis. And Marty St. Louis has that pre-recorded message and a beautiful thing. And he congratulates Stammer. And he kind of says that he made Tampa Bay a hockey town. And I posed today on Facebook that, I mean, you go back and talk about a Chris Gratton, talk about a Hobby Boulin, talk about a Vincent Lecavalier, talk about but Martin St. Louis having been the leading scorer. And now the Bucs, the Bolts' top 3 scorers in team history are 3 Canadians in Stamkos and Martin St. Louis and then Vincent Lecavalier. But I like how he just totally gave it all to Stammer. And if Stammer says, I was, he doesn't get emotional like that, but he did last night. And he was able to have the family and his parents there and the wife, and they did it at home. And the Lightning win in fashion 8-1 over the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that was a fantastic game to do it. And Bucs Skull Game in House says, let's go Rays. I appreciate you. So don't forget, the Bucs pick up Sean Farrell. Do you know after this is a little known story. If you read that article, you already know this. And I think, it's going to walk. They're going to walk home the time and run. I love it. When they took the wrong name up to the platform and then NFL Pete Rozelle announces the Bucs select Sean Farrell, guard out of Penn State. After the war room back at One Buck Place in that little trailer that was by the airport at One Buck Place, where they had the screen to try to block some of the noise and people from viewing so the players could practice on them. Yeah, that was an irony about the old One Buck Place. It was a trailer with workout equipment outside under an umbrella and right against the airport, but they had the most beautiful field. Because I told this story, I used to go over there all the time with my friends. Everybody would be like, hey, where are we going to go? We'd all get a 6. Well, let's not lie. It was 2 cases of Busch beer. Where are we going to go drink? And the funny thing about the weekends over, it was a little industrial area next to the airport. And security wasn't like it is today. And I would take my friends over there, and we'd park in this little parking lot behind the business right next to One Buck Place. And it was the off season, and you had the football gate, you had the football field, and the goal posts where Neil O'Donoghue was kicking field goals. Maybe it wasn't back. Maybe it was at that time. Maybe it was Michael Husted. But my friends and I would go over there. But tried to get Pete Rozelle. They ran up to him after they get the war room calls Pat, the equipment guy back in New York, and said, "You got the wrong pick. We wanted Booker Reese. Go up there and tell him we made the wrong pick." They were hoping after it's announced. Can you imagine after it's announced? And it was even before, the media circus at the NFL draft live again in Las Vegas this year is. And they try to get him to stay at the Buccaneers. And Pete Rozelle's like, "No, once you put the pick in, the pick is made. You're going to stick with it." So there he is, getting to the second round. Booker Reese is still on the board. It's 1982. Now, guys and girls, what about – so the Buccaneers decide that they're going to, with the Chicago Bears, their own divisional opponent, they're going to trade their first-round pick in 1983, and they get a second-round pick in 1983 from the Bears. So basically, they said to the Bears, "You can have our first-round pick. We need and they wanted to draft Booker Reese. Oh, they just struck him out. So there's 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth, bases loaded. So we'll have to see what happens here. Oh, that was a bad call, I think. Of course, in 1983, the Bucs went 2-14 in 1982, and 1983 was the year that it was Doug Williams' last year in his contract. And of course, guys and girls, you know that at the end of 1983, Doug Williams, Uva Culverhouse, being an idiot, doesn't give Doug Williams a contract to make him among the top. Out of 28 teams, Doug Williams was the 42nd paid quarterback. So there were 15 second-string quarterbacks that were making more than Doug Williams did as a starter for Tampa Bay. And no, Johnny Dean, I'm not saying that Doug Williams walked on water, but he was a starting quarterback. And if Doug Williams wasn't your guy, even if the team knew, so let's hypothesize that Doug Williams wasn't going to be your guy. The team already knew he wasn't going to get that second contract. You weren't going to give him a raise. The whole world knew 1983 had John Elway, Jim Kelly from Miami, and Dan Marino from Pittsburgh. But the Buccaneers, they move up. They give away their first-round pick in 83. Again, it was they went 2-14, so that first-round pick, they had them at number 17. They would have had a chance to pick Marino, who falls to number 28 for the Miami Dolphins. But the Buccaneers would go on a decade-long quest for another quarterback, so they could take Booker Reese. Now, here's the thing about Booker Reese. Even the players like a Sean Farrell interviewed for that story that Don Banks ran in SI again, he says he was a good kid, did some freakishly athletic things. Oh, I almost said a bad word, but it's after 10, so we're good. But gets a $150,000 check, and here's a little euphemism that's in that story. Gary, I know you're going to remember this because you just read it, is that he gets a $150,000 bonus from the Buccaneers. That was a big bonus for a second-round pick in 1982. And he wants to buy his mother a van. He wants to buy his own self a car. He goes over to a dealership there in Tampa and goes in to buy the car. And a little while later, the dealership calls One Buck Place, and they're talking to the player personnel, and they're like, "We have a problem." They're like, "What's the problem?" He goes, "Well, this kid, Booker Reese, walked in there, and he bought his mom a car, and he's buying himself a car, and he went to pay for they went to pay for the car, and Booker pulls out his $150,000 bonus check or his signing bonus, and he hands it to the guy, to the dealer, and he says, "Here, just take it out of this and give me the change." And the dealer's like, "That's that's not really how it works." And back in 1982, $150,000 could have bought you a lot of cars. So that's how green this kid was. Wasn't ready for the fame. Came to Tampa at a time when a lot of the team was getting in the nightlife, into the Mons Venus type of situations over in Tampa. And of course, he would have some problems. I'm not going to go into too much detail with that. I will sometime when I really have a chance to talk with Randy Grimes, because those of you know Randy Grimes, former Buccaneers center, former Buccaneer offensive lineman, locking it down. Really, really big on the substance abuse. Really big on helping not just former players, but people of all walks of life that are having addiction problems. And he's just a great guy, and he really takes it personally and as a heart of gold, and he wears it on his sleeve. So we'll have that Booker Reese, the problems, how deep it got with Booker, another time. But now the Bucs. So if Doug Williams wasn't going to get that second contract, because Hugh Culverhouse and John McKay at the time decide, well, everyone knows now in retrospect, John McKay, Doug Williams was his guy. But if Hugh Culverhouse knew that Doug Williams wasn't going to be his guy, you gave away your first-round pick in 83, knowing that was Williams' last year. So you guys and girls start to see the problem with that. The reason why that's an issue is because you had a Jim Kelly, a Dan Marino, a John Elway in the 1983 draft. But instead, what the Buccaneers do is they go at the end of the 83 season, Doug Williams gets away, and they send the first round pick in 1984 to the Cincinnati Bengals for Jack the Throw and Samoan Thompson, who couldn't even beat out the existing quarterback there, not Ken Stabler, but I forget the quarterback that was in Cincinnati. Of course, he ends up playing a total of 12 games for the Buccaneers over 3 seasons. He had like 4 touchdowns and 63 interceptions. Made Jameis Winston look like a Hall of Fame candidate. I'm kidding. But and the Buccaneers would go on after that. After Jack Thompson, they would, of course, trade for Steve DeBerg from the 49ers. And then as irony would have it, they would actually, in the supplemental draft, they would draft Steve Young, who was playing in the USFL. Steve Young would come here. They would trade Young away, and then you draft Testaverde in 87. Of course, that was a pretty unsuccessful deal for Testaverde in 87. And so you start to see how that ball starts to roll. So you start to see why the Red Sox won. So, yeah, there's going to be some Red Sox. Oh, is that why he just got in here? You know what? I'm going to bring this guy in because I've been trying to, improvise here for a minute, because as much as I talk about the history of the National Football League draft when it comes to the Buccaneers, I don't want to be remiss and not look at what the Buccaneers may have in store for next Thursday night. What are the Buccaneers' needs? What other players can we be talking about the Buccaneers may be interested in? And what a better way to do that than to go out to reach into my resources, and my resources are deep, and bring in this cat right now. He's locking it down with Pewter Report. And, of course, you know him from Cup of Ray when he comes on here with me, and he's been on with James Canada and myself. He's one of the most knowledgeable cats I know, and he just so happens to be a Boston Red Sox fan, I believe. Go ahead and welcome to the show from Pewter Report, Mr. JC, or Joshua Cole Allen. Joshua, how are you tonight?
A nice Red Sox win definitely sets off the tone, right?
You suck. I knew it. Did you purposely wait for the last? I mean, actually, you came into my lobby and it was already, the last out hadn't happened. Were you watching the game at all tonight?
I wasn't. No, I don't watch baseball until the playoffs. It's too slow. I can't concentrate.
Well, let's just jump into it, because I know you're on a limited schedule tonight. By the way, first of all, thank the family for sharing you with us for about 15 minutes or so, if you can.
Absolutely.
Of course, like I said, I told you, you're not only number one, are you locked down the best guy I know at the analyzation and breaking this stuff down, but also I don't have the chance to dive into the players and stuff like that. Tell us out here, what are some of the Buccaneers' needs that Joshua Cole Allen sees as we head into the NFL draft next Thursday night?
Well, I think there's definitely a couple positions that they could target. You look at safety as one of them. Defensive line, we all know. They could definitely stand to get younger there. As of right now, they only really have Vita Vea locked up for more than this year. Sue is still, potential to come back. You re-sign Will Golston for another year. So defensive line is definitely, I think, one of their top needs that they have.
Right.
The problem is this is another draft that is not extremely deep at the defensive tackle position. Guys like Jordan Davis from Georgia should be long gone. Devontae Wyatt might be there, the other Georgia defensive tackle. However, when you look at him and you look at what he's been able to do in his career there, he only had 5 sacks in 4 years, which is not overly impressive. He did have 21 pressures last year, but he was also playing on a defense that was chock full of potential NFL starters. There's also a little bit of character concerns stemming from, past instances. So that's another thing that they'll have to weigh into. Other guys that I like at the defensive tackle position is a guy like Logan Hall from Houston. He started 23 games and totaled 99 tackles and 8 sacks over his 4 years, over his 23 starts. So that's a guy that could look to kind of target at 27, or maybe potentially move back and grab in a trade down into the early 30s of that second round. Maybe they look at a guy like him at safety position.
Well, Josh, I was going to say, think about, and I want we'll talk about the D line before we move on to the safety or the back end. Hello. The Bucs are looking for that complement to Vita Vea, but they're looking for a guy with a little bit more pop, because Vita can block the sun out and take up 3 offensive linemen with the way that cat charge. And I don't know. I think Vita's got a pretty good get off, but the defensive lineman you're talking about, the defensive lineman the Buccaneers might be interested in, they're kind of looking for some of that speed, or are they just looking for another big body to fill in there? Because it seems
No,
that
no, you're right. They're looking for some speed there. They need some interior pass rush that's going to get to the quarterback and get to him quick. Devontae White, who I mentioned, 4.7, 740, great athleticism, explosive first step, probably one of the best first steps in the draft. Terrion Winfrey also has a good first step, but just underwhelming, kind of lack of production isn't there. He doesn't really have many secondary pass rush moves, and only he started 20 games in 2 seasons, but
right.
he only had 42 tackles and 6 sacks. Logan Hall, the guy, he's one of my favorite at the position. He's kind of a tweener, can play a little outside, inside. Ran a 4.88 40. Like I mentioned his production, so those are the guys I'm looking at. If they're going to look at Winfrey, I think it's a little bit later. Travis Jones has been mentioned to him, the defensive tackle at UConn, but he's more of a run defender. Really struggles in the passing game. Doesn't have many variety of pass rush moves, and early on in his career, until he develops that, he's mostly a 2-run defender. So not really what you're looking for. Same thing with Jordan Davis. He's more
Can I ask?
of
Can
a
I ask you a
nose.
question, though, Josh?
Yeah,
Sorry, I can barely. It's not you. It's just it's really loud out here, so I
yeah,
apologize if I
no
step
worries.
on you. The defensive Ojabe, or the defensive end that played alongside Aiden Hutchinson there in Michigan. Of course, the kid has the Achilles injury in his pro day there in Michigan, and people are talking about he may have been. Him and Aiden were perfect bookend complements. And I would also pose that any team that drafts Aiden Hutchinson, possibly at number 1 or in the top 3, and if that cat's still around in the second round, or that team can push up and get that bookend, they may be getting themselves 2 defensive linemen that can be bookend linemen. Could really starts to almost make me think about, even though it's too. I was going to say make me think about getting a Warren Sapp and a Derek Brooks in the same draft like the Bucs did in '95, even though one played at Miami and one played at FSU. But we drafted Joe Tryon-Shoyinka last year at number 32. And that kid definitely shows he's got a high motor and a giddy up. We talk about maybe he could put on a little weight, and he's talked about how he's working on his conditioning and getting ready for the. I don't think any rookie's ever ready for the length of an NFL pro season, because they go from playing, even though with the bowl games and all that these days, it's still almost double the length. But if the defensive end from Michigan is still there, we're talking about defensive line, and we want interior, but would that be someone at the Bucs in the second round? If he's around, they could maneuver, they could possibly look because he's just such a solid player, or would that make last year's pick of Joe Tryon-Shoyinka out of Washington moot point?
No, I definitely think they'd be interested in looking at edge rushers. Also, the problem there is the edge rushers that might be available. You're looking at a George Karlaftis. I'm not sure he really fits what the Bucs want. A guy like Boye Mafe out of Minnesota. Those Gophers have been good to the Bucs recently with Antoine Winfield Jr. He could be someone who's got positional flexibility like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka that can bump into 3 tech on obvious passing downs and give them a little bit of interior presence. A guy like Drake Jackson out of USC, he's another guy. If you want to look at later in the rounds, D'Angelo Malone or Alex Wright out of UAB, those guys could give you a little bit of pop on the outside. The problem is with a guy like David Ajabo is, the Bucs. I don't think the Bucs want to pick someone that's not going to be able to see the field, at least in a rotational role. So that's why I think he'd probably be off of their board. If he's there at 60 and the value's there, maybe. I just don't think he's going to last that long.
Wow, good point.
But on the defensive side of the ball, that's another question there. We've seen various scenarios in mock drafts, and again, we don't know what these pro team sports look like. With Devin Lloyd, linebacker out of Utah, who has been drawn favorable comparisons to a guy like Bobby Wagner, can drop in coverage, can gets in the backfield, explosive. As a situational edge rusher, tackle for a loss guy. If they're looking for life after Levante, that might be a guy they'd look at 27.
Hey, shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. Now, let me ask you this, Josh. You talk about the signing of Henry and Neal, and you bring in these good players. I'm looking forward to Neal. I don't care how much rubber that kid's got left on the tires. That guy was a monster at Florida, and you guys know I have an affinity for the Gators. Yeah. So, but anyway, you laughed at me today when I mentioned offensive tackle. And I'm not putting Donovan Smith down. He's got Tom Brady in that quick release for another season. I don't know if Kyle Trask is going to have that quick release. I know Kyle's a pre-snap read quarterback. He's a big stand in the pocket. and he can move around just enough to kind of avoid the rush. But I don't know if Kyle's going to have the release that Tom Brady does. And if that's the case, maybe a year from now, Donovan Smith, maybe the fact that he doesn't hold blocks as long. We saw it when Jameis Winston was here. Of course, Jameis was just improvising like the rubber band man constantly. But would the Buccaneers also look what positions along that offensive line? Obviously, offensive guard being one, but what are some of the offensive linemen you think the Buccaneers might be interested in next week's draft?
Yeah, I think if you're talking about offensive tackle, I just don't think with the Bucs pick at 27, there's going to be a guy that really fits the bill of what they're looking for. Most of those guys, a Raymond or a Tyler Smith, they project to bump into guard potentially. So if you're looking at the guard position there in the first round, a guy like Zion Johnson from Boston College, they've met with him, had a formal interview with him at the Combine. I think he'd be a strong selection. I'm not high on Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M. He's a good run blocker, still has a lot to work to do in pass protection, and the rate that this offense passes, I don't think that's a guy you want to take a chance on.
Not in 2022.
But if you go into the second, third, and even if he slips potentially in the fourth, which I don't think so, guys like Dylan Parham out of Memphis, another guy, Cole Strange, who's one of my draft crushes out of Chattanooga, small school guy, plays with a nasty demeanor. I think he'd be a good fit with the Bucs. So later in the draft at tackle, if they somehow recoup some of those mid-round picks, one of my favorites is a Matt Walletsko out of North Dakota. Incredible size, 6'7". He's got an 86-inch wingspan, good athleticism, really handled Boye Mafe. He's got a steep learning curve, but I think in 3 years, he's a guy who can step in and be a really good starting left tackle. Another guy, Dary Rosenthal out of Kentucky. I like him as well. He's got a little bit of character concerns, though, which might knock him down. Was suspended a few times for violating team rules. But this is not the best draft for tackles in general, I don't think, especially what the Bucs are looking for. So I think they steer away from that. Guard I could see, but as we said and as I mentioned to you earlier, I think they're really high on Aaron Stinney. They're high on Aaron Stinney. They're high on Leverett, and they're high on Robert Hainsey as well.
Yeah, Robert Hainsey, of course, and I said that today because I don't know what his sample size is at center for the Buccaneers, but of course, we get Ryan Jensen. Ryan Jensen does that overnight signing after Tom Brady announces he's back for his third season as a Buccaneer, and we love having him back there at center, Ryan Jensen. But Hainsey is obviously the second rounder out of Notre Dame in 2020. Oh, I lost Joshua. So maybe he'll pop back in here. Maybe he realized my battery's getting ready to go slow. But anyway, again, Joshua Cole Allen from Pewter Report joining me. You guys are starting to see the party getting going on here at the Ferg's, world famous Ferg's Sports Bar and Grill down here on Central Avenue, just below 16th Street in the Edge District of St. Petersburg. I can never get tired of saying that. So again, I'm going to be doing a radio show tomorrow down here. It's going to be the Tampa St. Pete Sports Connection. I'm going to be sharing on my social media page all the stations that you can find me on. You can listen to it live, and then I'll also share a copy of it afterwards. Just wanted to talk about the first round pick the Buccaneers have at number 27 in 2022. And I look back at, of course, all the first rounders that are, Jason Light and Light we trust, or in Light they Bucs fans trust. The first rounders during Jason Light's tenure. And of course, this is not a great list, but it's one of the longest lists the Buccaneers have ever had for a general manager in team history. Of course, in 2014, first rounders Mike Evans. In 2015, first rounder, of course, is Jameis Winston. 2016, his first rounder is Vernon Hargreaves. And in 2017, first rounder, of course, out of Alabama, tight end O.J. Howard. So Buccaneers select Hall of Fame wide receiver Mike Evans as the first pick ever in Jason Light's tenure. Then he kind of has a bum couple of years there with Jameis Winston, Vernon Hargreaves, and O.J. Howard. But then he kicks it up in 2018, of course, with Vita Vea, the defensive tackle out of Washington, former Husky. Gets it going still strong again in 2019 with Devin White, the linebacker out of LSU. 2020, come on, Tristan Wirfs, right? Unbelievable. 2021, smaller sample size. I don't want to say the jury's still out. I think we've seen flashes of what Joe Tryon-Shoyinka can do there at defensive end for the Buccaneers. But so those are just but let's, and the Buccaneers won't be drafting the first round quarterback. Surprises happen all the time, but the Buccaneers first-round quarterbacks in team history, of course, in 1978, there's Doug Williams out of Grambling. 1987 out of Miami is Vinny Testaverde. In 1994 out of Fresno State, it was Trent Dilfer. I think it was Fresno State. And, of course, in 2015, of going Jameis Winston. So I posed a question today for those of you that already knew the story about Booker Reese. And I don't mean to put it all in bum. It took a minute for me to figure out how to pose this question because I think the go-to for the worst draft pick in Buccaneers team history is always Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson, running back out of Auburn. Of course, Hugh Culverhouse flew him down here on the private jet for a team interview. He lost his eligibility to play his senior season there at Auburn. And he tells Hugh Culverhouse, don't draft me. I will never play for the Buccaneers one day. I'll never play one play for the Buccaneers. In 1986, Hugh Culverhouse and the Buccaneers still drafted running back out of Auburn. He does never play. In fact, he never suits up. I don't think he never even flew into town, other than when he visited the team before. In fact, I know that for a fact he didn't, unless he did when he's in spring training or coming around on vacation, but never to come to talk to the Buccaneers. Excuse me. But since Joshua left here early, I got a chance to get back to some of these. I got to mention this. Oh, God, I don't have it on me. I left it in my car. John Superfan Blakey. Gotta thank you, Cat brother. I gotta thank you so much because it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago that I had seen. It was a little bit more than that, maybe, because what happened was it got lost in the mail. But John, of course, that banging pin he had made, the pin, and I saw it on a social media page, and I was like, that is, and I didn't beg, although I probably, in retrospect, I would have in a minute, John. But I said, wow, what a great pin. And he said, I let me know when I can buy one. And of course, he sent one to me, of course, with some fire stickers. I'm going to show him on my next show. And it was gone for like 2 weeks. And of course, it shows up at the house, and there's a little thing on it that says I owe 30 cents postage. And I think that's the reason, John, I didn't tell you this when I messaged you earlier to thank you for that. I think that's the reason why I got lost in the mix a little, if you will. But man, 30 cents, that's a bargain at any price. I was so happy to receive that. Today, my wife handed me that mail, and guys and girls out there, you guys are all on board with me. We've all gotten a lot of our mail we get these days. It's junk mail. And there's a lot of bills. There's like the mortgage payment or electricity extra payment or the cable payment. If you even get, that mail anymore, most of that's electronic these days. But I was telling John that, I was so used to growing up. Who remembers the Big Blue Marble? P.O. Box 3054, Santa Barbara, California, 93103. I think that was the address because I had memorized it. I had like 3 pen pals at one point. I had a pen pal in France. I had a pen pal out in Montana. And I had a pen pal, of course, up in New York. That was where I was originally from. My family from Staten Island, New York. And I used to love it. So if you guys are out there, shout out in the comments. And do me a favor, share the show. I know it's a little slow tonight because it got a little louder than I was planning. And by the way, the shirt's pink. I was trying to represent, but it's not showing up in the light. So yeah, John, I got to thank you again. That was just fantastic. Made my day to get something in the mail that not only did I really, really want, and man, I'm so happy it finally got there. And it wasn't a bill. It was a pin and some fire stickers. I can't tell you much. Of course, I told you my son took one immediately, put on his laptop. I'm okay with that. John Superfan Blakey, I appreciate you, brother. Bucs Gold Gang in the house, 2 balls, 1 strike. Yeah, that game's over. They won it. So the Rays are back to 500. They come in after a bad start to the road game there in Chicago, White Sox, and then they go into Wrigley and they win 2 of 3 against the Cubs. They come home tonight. They lose to the Red Sox in the first game of a 3-game set. They'll play again tomorrow at 6:05, first pitch. And down here at Ferg's, of course, I'm doing the radio show here from 12 to 2 tomorrow. I'm going to have available live. For those of you who are out there, if you can catch the show, I'll share it on my social media page, all the stations it'll be on. And I'm going to have a call-in line. I'd love for you. If I've never get a chance to talk to you, can't take it over. It can't become a Bucs show. I've got the Eckerd College men's basketball team coach and a player or two from coming over and I got Ben Botham. We're going to be talking a lot of great stuff, but love to hear from you guys once or twice. Give me a holler. I'll have that available line. I'll be sharing it tomorrow on the radio show. Dumb letting Steve Young go. Dumb letting a lot of things go. Dumb trading away their first round pick in 83 and then trading the first round pick in 84 to bring in Jack Thompson. Ken Anderson. Let me see if anyone else had it, but Ken Anderson was the quarterback in Cincinnati. And here's the thing. The Bucs had a coach on the coaching staff who was the quarterback's coach in Cincinnati for Jack Thompson and Ken Anderson. And he said, I wouldn't give a second-round pick for that guy. But the Bucs give their first-round pick in 1983 to those Cincinnati Bengals to bring in Jack to throw in Simone Thompson. He plays a total of 12 games, 3 years he's here, he's out, never had success here in Tampa Bay. And then, of course, they have Steve DeBerg, let Young go.
and it's just a cascading effect. But even though we always peg it to where the Buccaneers let Vinny Testaverde get away to the Outlaws or the Gamblers, or wherever he played in the USFL, ends up winning Super Bowl MVP for the Washington football team. Of course, at the time they were the Redskins. I can say that. It's all in context. I'm not trying to be offensive. It's what they were called. You still look up in the history books. It's still what's written there. And so you can cascade. So you go back and you try to say you try to say that it was probably the year before when they started going after chasing their tail because they were trying to find that bookend compliment for Leroy Selman, Hall of Fame defensive end for your Bucs, and then they just went down that rabbit hole. But yeah, it was dumb letting Steve Young get away. I totally agree. Bucs, definitely, yes. Should have kept Steve Young. I totally agree, my friend. Evan C. Hardy in here. When are you ready to increase your TBB knowledge? Let me know. Good grief. TBB. TBB. Evan, you got to help me out here. I'm not sure what TBB is. Is that an acronym for something? Let's see. Bucs go game. We need tight end and tight end. Yeah, right. What's Gronk still? Because Gronk's going to be out there at that Super Bowl draft party next week in Vegas, and if you got $7,000, you can get a floating lily pad in the pool for that thing. I'd love to be out there, but I think Gronk's living Gronk's best life right now, and of course that was his thing, the Gronk cruise and the wrestling and all. I think he wasn't going to be here for the two-a-days or for the OTAs, and it's not a bad attitude thing where he's just not showing up, and he's not as OCD as Tom is as far as, and even Tom's not there at the voluntaries, but I think Gronk's just not really looking at, and maybe he's going to need that extra time to decide if he's going to play this season. Of course, he retired, 5 years ago because of that back, and he missed some games there last year, about 5 games with that back injury again. So, 100! Yeah, there you go. I told you guys. Massholes in the house. Wyatt is raw. Christopher Cole, super fan John says, never a problem, brother. I appreciate that, brother. And it is starting to get crazy out here, but I've got 13 minutes of battery left. So let me just go over real quick my notes. Again, I mentioned that Derek Brooks was drafted at number 28, and the Bucs select this year at number 27. And of course, in '95, the Buccaneers, Tony Dungy it wasn't Tony Dungy, it was Rich McKay. But they have Hardy Nickerson. They draft They draft John Lynch a couple of years before. They're looking to improve this defense. Defense was definitely the call for that team in 1995. And they go and they get Warren Sapp, and then right there at 28, still available, double nickel. One of the best players, if not the best player. A lot of people will feel that way. I still pose. See, they're getting into the whole. For me, it's Warren Sapp. I'm not saying he was all-world guy. I'm talking about the guy who it started up front with Warren Sapp. The get off that guy had maybe a Jerome Brown who was a little bit bigger, but never seen to this day anyone on the interior defensive line that had to get off that Warren Sapp had. The get off that Warren Sapp had and the havoc he created in the backfield allowed a Hall of Famer like Derek Brooks to patrol. I want to say like a cheetah, but of course with Tyreek Hill now signing with Miami, that's too in the news. But allowed a Derek Brooks to be his best self. And I would also pose that having to worry about Derek Brooks allowed Warren Sapp in some place to be able to get a little more crazy in the backfield and get sacks. It was all about that entire defense, that entire Hall of Fame Buccaneers defense. But for me, it was Warren Sapp. Derek Brooks is right there. Overall, most outstanding citizen, person, met most of his community. But then you start talking about that. You start talking about a Leroy Selman, who, of course, he works for, what was it, the bank, Barnett, not Barnett, but the bank he worked for after he retires from the Buccaneers with the back injury there in '86. And then, of course, he ends up becoming the athletic director for the USF Bulls. And the things that Leroy Selman did, they're building that big facility over there now, the workout facility, and they're naming it the Leroy Selman Center there at the USF campus. I'm going to be over there in a couple of weeks in May for the Creator Series. It's a big fight they're having at the Yingling Center. It's sold out already, and my son and I are going to be sitting ringside for that. It's basically 14 people that have YouTube. You're kind of like that Paul Ryan or the Jake Paul. Peter Blake, Rolex Reporter. I'm gonna do a shout out to you, but yeah, of course, Jake Paul, how he's went from becoming a content creator and now he's a fighter. You got all these guys, but theirs is more for charity. I don't think any of them are looking to become professional fighters like Jake Paul is seemingly starting to do. Again, mentioning that they have that Tyson Fury fight out here tomorrow. Make sure if you guys are in the area, it's beautiful out here. I had to wear this shirt. I wore a T-shirt, but I had to wear a lower shirt because it was a little chilly. Let me see how much battery I got left, and so I won't lie to you guys. Okay, let me put this. I got 10 minutes battery left. I've getting off the air here. I'm heading right down to 34th Street because I made the mistake today. My kids had never had a Popeye's chicken sandwich. And I'm like, what? People were shooting themselves over this a couple of years ago. But my daughter was home with a sniffle today from school. So I called her and I called my wife and I'm like, you think Rowan would want a chicken sandwich from Popeyes? And my wife goes, she just ate a lot of macaroni and cheese. And I hear, of course, in the background, my daughter go, yeah, I would like to try it. I would try that sandwich. So I bought a couple of chicken sandwiches, took one home. My son didn't get to eat one. My daughter did, and I ate one actually for lunch. So he called me. I was on my way down here tonight after UPS, and he's like, "Are you in Pinellas County?" And I'm like, "What'd you think? I was going to go to Hillsborough or Pasco?" And I said, "Yeah, but there's the police helicopter because of the game getting out over there." Driving over here tonight, all these police officers that do such a great job here in the city of St. Petersburg, working their overtime detail and making a little extra money, but locking it down, keeping our seat. This is probably one of the safest places to be, other than when you have Boston fans in town, as previewed a minute ago. But thinking about all the people, the social economic impact having the Rays here in St. Petersburg has been, and hopefully it continues to be. We're gonna have to see how that plays out with, of course, the stadium, and the Rays were under lease to be here until 2027, and they leave here before then. It's by chance of being fined. And so, yeah, my son's got me going to church at Popeyes right after the show here to pick him up a couple of chicken sandwich. Him and me both up a chicken sandwich because he has never tried one. And I told my daughter to try it today, and she liked it. If you guys and girls haven't tried one, I suggest you do. Really, that's about it. Other than next Thursday night. Personally, because I kind of posed the question, I was waiting to see if anyone talked about it. I do believe the Bucs trade away that draft pick. I'm not saying that there's not a position of need, but I think we all, as little research as I've done for this draft, and not that I don't research it, I'm looking at Buccaneers needs. But one thing is true about this draft: there's going to be a superstar or two, and because it's real. You never know how teams do. You never know how anyone does in the draft until a few years down the road, unless you drafted Justin Herbert, who wins Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2020, unless you draft a Chase Young with Washington football team, and the impact that the former Ohio State player makes with the Washington football team there in 2020. But there are a lot of players that you're not going to know for a couple of years down the road till you see how they play out and they mature, they learn, and they play within a system. This draft has a lot of quality. Draft has a lot of quality in the middle rounds, and a lot of teams are going to look to do that. But inevitably, there's at least 10 or 15 teams that when the Buccaneers are getting on the clock or getting near on the clock at number 27 there next Thursday night, probably around 10:45, 11 o'clock, I guess somewhere right around there, the Buccaneers phone is going to ring, or Jason Light may be calling other people and saying, look, here's my draft pick at number 27. And the Buccaneers can move back to the middle of the draft, increase a little bit personnel, get actual more draft picks, and they can add one of those positions of need, but also position of value in the middle rounds. So that's why I'm still going to be awake for it. I'm still going to make John, you asked me if I'm making it to the draft party. I get off UPS by like 9:30, so I may still make the draft party just in time for the Buccaneers draft pick. But, as far as what I believe, I don't want to ruin it, spoil it for everybody saying I think it happens. I think if Jason Light's presented an opportunity for one of those teams that are a little desperate more to move up and get a player that can have an impact on their team in 2022, the Buccaneers can move back a couple of positions, pick up an extra draft pick or two, because they are one of the teams that have lesser draft picks throughout this entire 2022 draft. And then they can look to fill in some more holes in the middle of the rounds. Of course, the further back you go there, you also don't get the players. So you get first rounder you get for 5 years, second rounder for 4 years, but you start going back. You don't get those players for as long or under lock and key as long. So you're also having to redo contracts if you do find that diamond in the rough. But that's okay. If you find that diamond in the rough and they're proving themselves to the team, you cross that bridge when you get to it. Let's see here. Oh, Gary just asked something. I see another Oh, thank you, John, again. And Gary comes in here. Gary sees Ghost Wolf and says, are you doing live during the draft? I don't know about this year. I think I just answered that by saying I'm working that night. So I am down to 5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and run my out. It's a little short of an hour. Thank you for joining me. I didn't get covered all. I had so many notes today from last night. I think it covered all. Let me go ahead. I got a minute or two. I talked about Snap Judgment, the article that Don Banks ran for Sports Illustrated for 16 years. Started covering the Bucs in 1990, the St. Petersburg Times. Moves on to the Minneapolis Star Tribune. And here's the thing about Don Banks. He had just gotten hired by the Las Vegas Review and getting ready was hired with them as they were preparing to get they were the Oakland or Los Angeles Raiders at the time, but Raiders were moving to Las Vegas, or they were Oakland Raiders. And so they hired him, and he just got back into covering football, and he was doing a great job, as always Don Banks did, covering those Las Vegas Raiders. And it was in 2019. He had made it to the Hall of Fame in Canton that year. Saw a friend of his win a huge award. I didn't write it down. And anyway, he dies in his sleep at his hotel. They find him, passed peacefully, which is the way it should be for such a great person like Don Banks was, and a fantastic job he did. Again, one of my idols growing up. I covered Hubert Mizell, Don Banks, and Tom McHugh, and some of the shoulders of giants that I've stood on. It's kind of like, I hope you, if you read them, if you read them and you're old like me, a little long in the tooth, you'll hopefully, if you see my writing, you'll see a little bit of them in my writing, because it's kind of where I got it from. I don't want to say I emulate them. It's just that was the feeling I had. You get up in the morning, we'd be riding across the old Howard Frankenstein or Franklin Bridge in my Uncle Sonny's custom van, and he'd have the sports page, and there I am, just the 8-year-old me all the way up through 52-year-old me now. Oh, I dated myself. But opening that sports page and reading the day's articles, right? And then the most important part was the Monday morning, especially after Buccaneer victory, opening up and seeing what Don Banks had to say about it, seeing what Hubert Mizell had to say about it, getting the Tampa Tribune, which I didn't get delivered to the house because we had the St. Pete Times, but right when I got to work at City Hall or wherever I was working at, grabbing that Trib and seeing what the Tom McHugh was writing about it. And because that's what we did. It wasn't social media pops. It wasn't immediately. Of course, these days it is, and that's not for a bad thing. But we'd get into the paper. We couldn't roughly, grab it. You'd get ink on your hands, and the more colorful, the better. It was the creamsicle, and the creamsicle didn't come off your hands, but the ink did from the newspaper. And it's funny because I know people that can't stand the touch of a newspaper. Me, I love the touch of a newspaper. To fold it, put it under my own arm, head to the bathroom for an hour and a half. I'm kidding. Thanks for joining me here on a Friday night for a cup of Ray After Dark from Fergs. I hope you found something entertaining about this show. Maybe it was just a masshole that stopped by and made a masshole of himself. I don't know, but I want to go ahead and remind you guys, like I always do on every one of these, even though it's a Friday night, these are my favorite times to remind you. Everyone needs to know that someone cares, and since it's Friday night, you've got the next 2 days, unless you work a shift where you're on the weekends. Be the one that lets them know that someone does care, because, again, they need a brother and a sister check just now today. Or maybe you right now are in need of a brother and sister check. And here's the best part about it is maybe someone else who's watching this show and enjoying a cup of Ray here on Bucs Report on a Friday night will be the one that reaches out to let you know. Because really, we all care about each other. That's what this entire platform is all about. Bucs Report and doing these shows. If it wasn't like that, I wouldn't enjoy doing it. Thanks for joining me down here from Fergs on Central Avenue, just below 16th Street in the Edge District of St. Petersburg. Have a great evening, everybody. See you on the next Cup of Ray.